Okay, welcome back to the channel. We have a bag here of Arkansas black apples that I got from the Apple Festival. What we're going to do is we're going to make an apple pie today. But at first, what I'd like to show you is how many apples are actually in this bag of Arkansas black apples. In the beginning of a video I had done a while back, I said that I had a gross of apples. A gross is 144 of something, 12 times 12. I had 12 bags. I assumed that there were 12 apples in each bag. As I have recently found out, as I've gone through each bag does not have 12 apples. The first bag had 16 apples. The second bag had 12. The third bag I ate and didn't count, so I apologize for that. But this bag of Arkansas black, we are now up to 7. There's 8 apples now in this bag, and it's already still half full. So I know because I've had, as you can tell, I'm in a different kitchen. I'm not in my kitchen. I'm at my mother-in-law's house doing this recipe from there. And so the audio is all voiceover at this point because at the time of making the video the house was very noisy. So I can tell you that at the end of this count there were 17 apples in this bag, which was remarkable. They're not big apples, so 17 apples did fit in the bag, and that was great. At this point in time, I'm washing each apple. I am counting to see how many apples I actually want to try to put into the apple pie. And I believe at final count I had 7 or 8 apples that I ended up putting into the apple pie. But we'll see what the count is here. That's number 4. And here we're doing 5. So I ended up washing 9 apples, and the remaining 6 or 7 there I am taking away and putting in a bag and holding them for later. At this point I'm still using some ingredients. I got some unsalted butter. I'm only going to use 1 stick. I got some Pillsbury pie crusts. And instead of making my own dough, I decided to get Pillsbury and have Pillsbury have the dough already made for me. It has instructions on the side of the box on how to actually make an apple pie. I didn't follow those instructions. The instructions that I ended up doing, I've learned in the past, and I've had some experience making apple pies. So I just wanted to show you that, if you don't know how to make an apple pie, the box will tell you the ingredients and the basic instructions on how to make an apple pie. But what I do here now is I have a clear pie plate, taking out one of the pre-made rolls. Took out both the pre-made rolls, let them sit on the counter. I'm going to be opening up one of the pre-made rolls and unrolling it and putting it into the pie plate. And you'll see that nothing is ever perfect, and regardless of how this pie shell rolled out this first time, I wanted to just show you that you keep pushing on. So I am making this recording after the fact, and I remember what happened when I started unrolling it, and then it pretty much shredded in my hands. But it all came out well. It's kind of like Play-Doh in a way in this stage of its life. It's sticking to the roll. It doesn't want to unroll. It doesn't want to do what it's supposed to do. I'm getting frustrated, I can tell you that. Remember how I was feeling when I started undoing this, and I got quite frustrated at it, especially when it decided to grab a nice master hole in it, and it just didn't want to unravel. And I thought, man, what do I do now? I'm recording. Ah, come on, look at this thing. Alright, well, I'm just going to unroll it and put it in the pie plate, and we'll make it happen. As whatever happens, we'll make do. So I get every single piece that I can trim off of this dough, and I start piecing it together. Not everybody's dough is perfect. You don't give up. You just keep drilling with what you have. And you know, I'm at my mother-in-law's house. I didn't have my mother-in-law's house. I didn't have the necessary ingredients. I'm sure they were there, but I didn't want to disturb anybody by asking, if they could, or giving me the ingredients on how to make pie crust from scratch. I had this dough. It, to me, looks still viable, and as long as I could unravel it in straight enough sheets that I knew that I could piecemeal it together. And so that's what we're watching here. I'm piecemealing this together as best I can and unraveling it as best it'll unravel. And at this point, I'm stretching the dough as best I can stretch it. I am making sure there are no open hole gaps between the pie dough and the glass plate. I am definitely pushing down on the dough, pushing it into the corners of the plate, making sure it's not too far up high on the ridges. Definitely pulling pieces here and pushing pieces there, and just trying to stretch it as best as I can to make it into some form that resembles the base of an apple pie. I opened the top one, but I'm going to let it sit, because at this point what I need to do is what I do when I make my apple pies. I've made them several different ways, but in what I did here was I took the cinnamon and I spread it along the bottom. And what I'm showing you here is how I am going to be coring and peeling the apples and slicing the apples, so that I can lay them out. That bowl there is for the apple core. When I'm done with it, the machine will kick out the apple core, and I'll just put the apple core in that paper bowl there. So here I have the cinnamon. That's just plain cinnamon, ground cinnamon. It doesn't have any sugar in it. I am diabetic, and so this is a no sugar added apple pie. So what I do is I sprinkle the cinnamon around the bottom of the crust. You're not necessarily covering it completely, but you are covering it to a point where it looks like it's been cinnamoned. And then I take Splenda. This is the powder Splenda. It's not Splenda Blend. Splenda Blend, they say you can do 1-to-1 for sugar equivalents, but Splenda Blend has real sugar in it. This is just Splenda, and what I do here is I just powder the base of it again, just like I did with the cinnamon. I'll take a spoon and I'll just shake it around and put Splenda in the bottom of the pie crust. And then as a thickening agent, so when the juices start flowing, as a thickening agent, I'm now putting a few spoon sprinkles of cornstarch. And there are a couple rules or a couple processes or ways to do this. It doesn't matter, in my opinion. This works this way just as well as if I were to make a roux. If I were to take the butter and melt the butter and then put the cornstarch in it and then stir it up until the cornstarch is dissolved, and then put the cinnamon in there and the Splenda in there and get a nice sauce, and then pour the sauce in the bottom, and then we'll pour the sauce throughout the apples or the apple pie once it gets created. That works just as well, but I've found that this also works by just putting the cinnamon and then the Splenda and then the cornstarch sprinkled on the bottom. And now what I'm going to do is what you can sort of see in the left hand corner there is I am running the apples through that machine. The core remains on the machine, and I take the apple slices with a knife, a butter knife, in my hand. And funny enough, I thought, where are my gloves? I'm not wearing gloves. But I take a butter knife and the apples in my hand, and I slice them right down the middle. And I believe it's a butter knife. I can't remember now what I did, if it's a butter knife or not. If it's white handle, nope, that's actually a steak knife. Oops. But it didn't go all the way through, so I mean I'm able to make the apple slices. And so what you're basically doing now is you're slicing the apples and you're layering the apples one by one around the base of the pie crust on top of the spice mixture. Now I did 9 apples, so each apple gets split in half and cored and layered into the pie. Pull off the core, slide the device back, stick the next apple on. Apples have already been washed, so I can just get it and go, and then peels the apples. And sometimes it peeled them great and it sliced them great, and other times the machine just didn't do what I needed it to do, and it left some of the peel on the apple. And I'll eat an apple no matter what. I don't really care if my apple pie has slices in it or peels in it or not. So some of the slices did have peels on them, and to me that just added flavor and added texture. So it didn't bother me at all that the apple slices had peels on them. So this is apple number 2, and I'm spreading it around and layering it as best I can. Okay, and halfway through the process, before the pie is layered too high, I put another sprinkle of cinnamon and Splenda and the cornstarch. So when the apples cook down, their juices will mix with the cinnamon and the Splenda and the cornstarch and make the pie thick. So when you go to cut it, it doesn't fall apart when you're cutting it. It actually holds its shape. That's what the thickening agent is for. And again, in this spot, this is where if you were to then take the cornstarch and the butter and the cinnamon and mix it all together and then just drizzle it over top, this is where you would drizzle it over top. Instead of sprinkling it like I'm doing it, you would just drizzle it over the top. And that's the end of the cornstarch. I'm not going to be using the cornstarch anymore. From here on out, it's just going to be the Splenda and the cinnamon. And I continue to work on the apples. Now this apple looks like it's tearing apart. Lots of it, just shredding it. So I have to salvage what I can salvage on at this point in the game. It really shredded the mess out of that apple. It's kind of irritated at it. But what had happened was the device, after cutting 4 or 5 apples, it collected residue on the blade, and I had to go in there and clean up the blade a bit so that the next few apples don't shred like that apple shredded. Now what I ended up doing with that apple is I believe I saved it to the side so that I could eat it and shared it with my dog. So I'm pretty sure that's what I did with that apple. So I'm showing you here where it's a little out of focus. I apologize for that, but I'm showing you that the blade and how it works, and that it's covered with gunk, and I need to clean it out so that when the apple gets through, the apple actually pushes that handle back, but only so far, and then the spring that is connected with that handle springs back and rides along the edge of the apple. The blade then cuts into the apple, and it slices the apple as it it peels the apple as it goes through the slicer at the very end. And so every so often you have to stop and clean the blade off so that the next apple doesn't get shredded like that one just did. And say now I've cleaned it up, and this apple came through fairly decent. It still left some peel on it, but you know, I'm not going to discard the apple. I'm just going to keep going, cut it in half. And like I said, a little bit of the peel in the apple pie is not bad. It gives texture, gives uniqueness. You know, not every apple pie is perfect, and it's your product, and it's your apples, and you know, don't waste product, don't waste food. So I just keep on going with it. If nobody wants to eat my apple pie, fine, I'll eat it by myself. So you know, that's kind of how my philosophy was on that aspect of it. All right, looks like I have about 3, maybe 4 apples left to go. If you've never used that device before, what you can't do is baby it. You pretty much have to run it through as quickly as you can to get it to slice and peel and core and everything that it has to do. If you do it very slowly, chances are you're going to shred your apple. So I'm cleaning up at this point. I did not use the last apple. My fingers there at the end were telling you that I only used 8 apples for this apple pie. I think I stopped because it got pretty high in elevation. And so now we're going to clean up our area and then begin to put the layer on top. And before we put the layer on top, what I need to do is slice my butter. And for this apple pie, I only used half a stick, 4 tablespoons. I think it's tablespoons here. I only used half a stick. Before I do that, though, I do want to do another layer of cinnamon and another layer of Splenda, covering the apples best I can. There's no real measurements here. I apologize for that. The only real measurement, I guess, would be the number of apples, but I started with 9 and I only used 8. Um, and as far as the cinnamon and the Splenda go, it's an eyeball thing. You just eyeball it as to what you feel is the right consistency and the amount for each one of those ingredients. The butter, I can tell you, was half a stick, and I sliced the half a stick into pieces, at which point I sliced those slices in half, and in some cases I quartered them. And what you do is you put the butter on top of the apples. You layer the butter on top of the apples in various locations so that when the pie starts to cook in the oven, the butter will melt and it will mix with all the juices, and it's just something that you do. Slices don't have to be exact. They don't have to be the right amount. I would caution you to probably only use 4 tablespoons, half a stick. It depends on how much you really like butter and whether you think you can put that entire piece all over there. In the case where if I melted the butter and then mixed all the ingredients together, yeah, that little piece right there was a pain. And after the 3rd time that it hit the table, I didn't use it. It just rolled off the mountain again. So at that point, I just let it go and didn't bother with it. Yes, the countertop was washed off before I started using it, so everything was clean. But at the same point, after the 3rd time rolling off the mountain, I was like, no, you don't get to get in the apple pie this time. So I just left it sit. But had I used the whole stick, or had I actually melted the butter, I probably would have used the whole stick, mixed it in with the cinnamon, Splenda, and the cornstarch, and then at each layer poured a little bit of it, and at the very last, at the end of it, I would have poured the rest of it over top, drizzled it over top. At this point, I'm cleaning up my area, my station, putting the butter back in the fridge. Now let's see if this last roll actually unravels the way the first roll was supposed to unravel, to where I can actually put it on top of the pie. Look at that, no holes. It's actually going to do what the first sheet was supposed to do. And once you get it to a certain point, then you just bring it up on top and you start unraveling it as best you can without it falling apart, and you start putting it on top of the pie. Because I think at this point I might have had a hole, but that's okay because you want holes in the top of the pie so that the pie can vent. It's got to vent the steam out eventually. So that one did have a half a smile hole right on the top of it, which was fine with me. That's kind of what it was supposed to do. And then I take my 2 fingers and I crimp the edges of the top to the actual pie plate. And I'm sorry that's not in frame as well as it could have been. But on a side note, I don't look like that anymore. Shaved my mustache and my beard, and I'm all clean shaven now. And I will be making more apple pies. I still have 5 bags of apples yet from October. They're still healthy. They're still good in my fridge. There's nothing wrong with them. So these apples are some of the best apples. That's why I get them every year in October. I think what I'm still doing out of frame here is I'm crimping the edges to make sure that the two layers of the pie are snug. And then what I'll do is I'll take a butter knife and put the iconic slits in the top of the pie. And I am showing you at this point, with a very unsteady camera hand, the actual height that the pie got outside the shell. I mean, the pie plate is about maybe 1.5 inches in height, and then with all those apples stacked on top, that's a good 3 inches, maybe 3 or 4 inches. And here I'm taking a knife and I'm putting the slits in the top, like you see on most apple pies. They have slits on top. Now, what other people will do with the top of the apple pie at this point is they'll get an egg wash and they'll put an egg wash on top so that when it comes out of the oven, you'll have that nice shiny glaze on the top. I have never been a fan of egg wash, so my apple pies do not have the egg wash on top. When I was a kid and I first tasted it, I just did not like the flavor, so my pies will not have egg wash on. So the oven was preset to 425. Now there's a science behind this. You cook it on 425 for about 20 minutes, and then after that 20-minute mark you reduce it to 375 and you cook it for another 50 minutes, and then after that you take it out. Now while you're cooking at 375 for the additional 50 minutes, you have to check it every 20 minutes to make sure that your pie crust is not turning brown around the edges. If it is turning brown around the edges, then take some tin foil, Reynolds wrap foil paper, and cut it into strips and gently put it around the edges of the pie so that it doesn't burn your edges of your pie. And here we are at the end of the cooking time, the 25 minutes at 425, and the 20 minutes at 425, and the 50 minutes at 375. I did end up burning the edges slightly, but it all turned out great, and I hope that this has inspired you to go out and experiment. Make your own apple pie, see how it tastes. Thank you for watching.